Positivity, please. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Corey. I am an art director, graphic designer. Basically, I work in client services. I'm just gonna let you know my personal formula of how I determine what to charge on a project basis. This is not gonna be a video on how to determine your hourly rate, though it will include hourly rate stuff in it, but I will let you know how I personally decide how much I'm going to put on that proposal and on that invoice when it's time to collect my check. If you came across this video randomly, I know you have probably been searching for a while for like exact numbers, and you keep hearing everyone tell you that they cannot tell you how much to charge. That is 100% correct. They cannot. What I can provide is a guideline on how to come up with that number on your own, but there are way too many factors to determine what your rate should be, and that's just what it is. I hate to break it to you. Let's collectively focus on trying to make this as easy as humanly possible for you, okay? While I do work in art direction and graphic design, I feel like this formula, this structure may be helpful for people in any type of client services or service-based businesses, and so if you don't care about what I do, this might still work for you, you know? So let's get into it, because now I'm talking too much. The first thing I want to acknowledge is that ultimately we're just filling in these 4 boxes. The boxes are your hourly rate, your capacity, your overhead, and outsourcing. And filling out those 4 boxes will ultimately determine a 5th box, which is your rate. The very first box that you should consider would be your monthly expenses. How much does it cost every single month for you to run your business? This could be anything from software subscriptions to if you're renting any equipment, how much that costs per month. If you rent out an office space, how much that costs per month. Just consider those things. You'll want to add all of those up, and that would then become your overhead. For the sake of this, I would also consider how many projects you anticipate having every month. This might be hard to do at first, but also assuming at first your startup costs and your overhead would be much lower, so you might not have to do this. But if you are someone who's already practicing this business and you already have an idea of how many clients you anticipate every single month, or ideally would have every single month, you would then divide that overhead by those number of clients. So if I'm someone that only wants to work with 2 clients every month and my overhead is $1,000, that I would split that, and the number I'm filling into my overhead box would be $500. Because keep in mind, this is for this particular project. So ideally, you'll want those monthly expenses to be covered, ideally, by this client work, and so you would include that in your rate, right? And so if I want 2 clients per month and it's $1,000, ideally, I would like for each client to cover $500 of those expenses. You can play with that as you wish, but just go ahead and put that in the box. Remember, this formula can be adjusted however you see fit. Just put it in the box. Next, you'll want to determine what your hourly rate is. You might already have an idea of this. In order for me to determine my hourly rate, I considered my market, where I'm located, my age, the amount of experience I have, looking at comparisons for other people in my industry and with my specific title and how much they're making. If they are a man or a woman, their race, all of those things do matter. There are a whole bunch of different factors. I'd say like the easiest low-hanging fruit might be to check out LinkedIn for people with that title to see what their salary ranges are looking like or their hourly rates are looking like. This might take a huge chunk of time, and it is something that you may adjust over time. So maybe in the beginning you might feel like you went a little too high. I typically don't think anyone ever really goes too high. Let me not speak too soon, but sometimes people may feel like they've gone too high, and so they might knock it down a little bit. It's all up to you. That number is completely up to you. But of course, you want to be competitive in the space amongst your peers or amongst people who are doing the same things as you, and so doing the research is important. Because it can potentially fluctuate, something else you may consider in your hourly rate is the potential budget of your prospective client. And so like I would probably charge a higher hourly rate for a huge company that I know makes billions of dollars every month than I would for a small business that is local to me. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, think about that, but ultimately it's up to you. Just figure out what is appropriate for you at an average at this time, and go ahead and plug that into that box. The next thing you'll want to think about is the scope. What are all the deliverables included in this scope, and what are the individual tasks it takes to complete each deliverable? Before you get too into the weeds of things, If you are considering outsourcing, do not include any of those tasks. We'll get to those later. But for the tasks that you anticipate handling yourself based on your hourly rate, go ahead and list all those out. You don't need to get too specific with the tasks themselves. You don't need to list out that you'll be on Pinterest for 2 hours and you'll have to Google a few things and then you'll have to ask a colleague some questions. All of that could go right under research. So you'll list out all of the tasks that it takes for you to accomplish each deliverable. Why we're doing it based on each deliverable is because sometimes on your invoice, and this depends on the person and how you run your business, but you may want to itemize the deliverables and give a price to each one. There are some instances where a client might say, like, this cost is a little too high for me for the total project. Are there any adjustments we can make to this scope to bring it down to this budget that I have? Because you have an idea of the task for each deliverable, you have an idea of the value of each thing that you determine yourself. By value, I mean the time it takes for you to complete it and the cost it would be for them to afford for you to complete it, if that makes sense. Once you have a complete list or a near complete list of all of the action items for those deliverables, you'll want to estimate the amount of time it will take you to complete each action item. Then beyond that, you'll also want to add on hours for admin and client communications. This could be anything from weekly meetings, weekly emails, emailing your client in general, putting together review decks, not decks that would be delivered to them, but things that'll help you move along in the process and obtain feedback. These are all things that you'll want to also consider because they also take time. On top of that, you'll want to add on some cushion room, some breathing room. So any additional hours, a fair amount of additional hours that you think is enough for your cushion just in case you do go over. I say this because technically with this formula, the more time you take that is over your predetermined capacity, which is the budget you just allotted yourself, that means you're making less hourly. If I allotted myself 40 hours to a project and I have now gone over 20 hours, then my project budget, what's the math? I don't know. I'm pretty sure my hourly rate is down by 50%. Don't quote me, y'all. I don't do math. Sorry. I'm just here to give the formula. You do the math. You do the math. But at the end of the day, anything over what you allotted yourself is technically unpaid time. And so you were kind of borrowing from that hourly rate for what you were paid for. Again, this is all determined by you and it's up to the client to agree to it. So essentially you'll want to make sure that you are not underpaying yourself. That's basically what we're doing here. Just make sure you don't underpay yourself. So add on some cushion hours or don't. Remember, I'm just suggesting. Estimating your time is something that may take practice. And so I do suggest if it's not something that you're already comfortable with or familiar with, take a look at some of the work that you're doing currently, whether that is passion projects or, well, maybe not. Passion projects do sometimes the timing is off because you're not a client, you know what I mean? But either way, take some of the work that you do now and time track it. I would time track literally everything so you have an idea of how long it does take you to do certain things. And again, this is trial and error. So as you do more client work, you will get better at estimating how much time you should allot to each thing. Now that you have all of your hour estimates for your deliverables, for your client comms and admin and your cushion room, you're going to add all those up and that then becomes your capacity. So go ahead and fill in that box. Now let's consider outsourcing. Will you need help and are you in a position to outsource help to complete this project? If not, and you're doing it all on your own, you can go ahead and fill in that box with a big fat 0. If you are considering outsourcing, even if you're not 100% sure, if you are considering outsourcing any part of that project, you will want to do the same process that we just did for those hours for your personal deliverables and action items and complete those for the outsource work. So in other words, you are basically building the capacity for contractors. Let's say you were doing a branding project that will also have a website built after. You don't want to do the website. You'll handle the branding, but you don't want to do the website. You will need to consider the task that it takes, and you might need to reach out to someone who does this work or whatever the case may be, but you will need to consider the task that they need to complete in order to give that deliverable or those deliverables, and you'll want to estimate the hours for each. Same exact process we just did. You'll also want to consider their hourly rate. So you will need to do some research or determine what is the ideal rate you would like to pay your contractors hourly. You'll want to make this list for each contractor because they likely will have different rates. But once you have all of those hours and those rates, you'll go ahead and multiply each contractor's hourly rate by the hours that you were allotting them. Then you'll add all those totals up together. That will then become your outsourcing budget. The client should be taking care of this as well. So you can now put that into the outsourcing box. You now have all 4 boxes filled out, so you are now going to PEMDAS your way to your rates. Your hourly rate times your capacity plus your overhead plus your outsourcing budget is now your ideal rate. I say ideal and not your minimum rate or whatever, because these are all things that can be adjusted, like I said before. The reason why hourly rate is still separate from the other 3 boxes and we aren't combining your hourly rate and your capacity together and just adding up the 3 boxes is because your hourly rate may fluctuate. Everything else in here may fluctuate. At this point, now that you have a rate, some people may do a markup. They may add a little percentage onto that because whatever the case may be, that's up to you. I think I kind of handle that by adding in those cushion hours. But again, totally up to you how you're feeling once you have that rate. But at least it gives you a starting point. Now, I know this was a little confusing. There may be some differing opinions on how to determine this. This is just what I do personally, and it has worked for me. I've been doing this literally since forever. Of course, once I do get to that ideal rate, sometimes it ends up being lower. Sometimes it ends up being even higher depending on other factors. But this is what I use to get to a point where I find a number that I am comfortable with or a number that seems fair based on a formula. I know a lot of people, when they're determining their rate, have a hard time deciding if something is fair or not, and they need more structure in determining the number rather than just pulling stuff out of their asses. This is what might help you, and I hope it does. If you have any other suggestions or information or anything of that nature, comments, questions, concerns, please leave me a comment down below. Share and like this video if it was helpful to you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.